The sound of a slap echoed through the room like a gunshot. Time froze. Champagne glasses stopped mid-clink. Conversations died. 50 pairs of eyes turned to watch my cheek bloom red under the crystal chandelier lights of our dining room. My husband's brother stood over me, his palms still tingling from the contact with my face, his eyes wild with rage. Behind him, my birthday cake, 40 candles still flickering, waited for a wish that would never come. "You manipulative bitch," David hissed, his spittle landing on my stinging cheek. "You think I don't know what you've done? You've turned my own brother against me. $15 million. My inheritance. My birthright." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply touched my burning cheek and smiled. What happened next would become family legend. What happened next would make David wish he'd never been born into the Preston family at all. Want to know what I did? How I made the man who humiliated me on my birthday lose everything he ever cared about? Keep watching. Because by the end of this story, you'll understand why everyone in the Preston family now speaks my name in whispers. And why David can't speak my name at all. "Olivia. The caterers need you in the kitchen." My sister-in-law Claire's voice carried through our sprawling lakeside mansion, finding me as I adjusted the sapphire necklace Robert had given me that morning, my 40th birthday present. The gems caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through our bedroom window, throwing blue fire across the cream-colored walls. I studied my reflection, blonde hair swept into an elegant updo, the black cocktail dress hugging curves I still maintained through rigorous daily workouts. Not bad for 40, I thought, though the small lines around my eyes told stories of both laughter and tears from 15 years of marriage to Robert Preston. "Coming," I called back, slipping on my heels. Downstairs, our home buzzed with pre-party energy. Florists arranged the last of the white roses. Bartenders stocked the bar. Waitstaff in crisp uniforms rehearsed their routes through the living room where later, 50 of Boston's elite would gather to celebrate my birthday. Claire intercepted me at the bottom of the grand staircase, her perpetually worried face even more pinched than usual. "The ice sculpture is melting too fast," she fretted, tablet in hand with her meticulous checklist. My husband's younger sister had always been the family organizer, a trait I normally appreciated. "And the band called. Their pianist has food poisoning." I squeezed her shoulder. "The sculpture will be fine for the important photos. And Robert can play piano if needed, he's been practicing that jazz piece for weeks." Claire nodded, unconvinced. At 35, she remained unmarried, dedicating herself to the Preston family business and, more specifically, to her 3 brothers. Of the siblings, only Claire had ever truly accepted me. "There's my birthday girl." Robert's arms encircled my waist from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. At 45, my husband remained handsome, tall, with salt and pepper hair and the confident bearing that came from being the eldest Preston son and CEO of Preston Development, the family's real estate empire. "Everything looks amazing," he murmured, kissing my neck. "You've outdone yourself." I leaned back against him. Couldn't have done it without Claire. "Speaking of family," Robert's voice dropped, "David just arrived. He's in one of his moods." I stiffened. David, Robert's middle brother. 38 years old with all the responsibility of a teenager. The family charmer. The family disappointment. "Did he bring anyone?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Some model. 22, maybe. Don't worry, I had James put them in the East guest room, far from ours." I nodded, grateful for my husband's understanding. David and I had a complicated history, one that predated my relationship with Robert. A history no one in the family knew about. A history I'd spent 15 years trying to forget. "Dad's coming too," Robert added. Now that was surprising. William Preston, family patriarch and founder of Preston Development, rarely attended social functions since his semi-retirement 5 years ago. At 75, he preferred the solitude of his Cape Cod estate, emerging mainly for board meetings and Christmas. "Any particular reason?" I asked, careful to hide my discomfort. Robert shrugged. Said he has an announcement. Probably another donation to the hospital wing or something. I nodded, but unease crawled up my spine like a spider. William had never liked me, viewing our marriage as Robert's one great mistake. In 15 years, he'd never visited our home without an agenda. Olivia. A booming voice called from the terrace doors. There's my favorite sister-in-law. I turned, forcing a smile as Michael, the youngest Preston brother, bounded toward us with the energy of the former college athlete he was. At 33, he remained boyishly handsome, eternally good-natured, and, like David, chronically underemployed despite his nominal position at the family company. He swept me into a bear hug, lifting me off my feet. 40 looks damn good on you. Put her down before you wrinkle that dress, came an amused female voice. Michael's wife Sophia approached more sedately, their 5-year-old twins trailing behind her. Aunt Olivia. The boys chorused, attaching themselves to my legs once Michael released me. For the next hour, I played the perfect hostess-to-be, greeting early arrivals, directing staff, and keeping one eye on the door for David's inevitable dramatic entrance. He didn't disappoint. At exactly 6 o'clock, when the terrace was filled with mingling guests sipping champagne, the French doors flew open. Conversations paused as David Preston made his entrance, one arm draped around a willowy blonde whose dress seemed to consist mostly of strategic cutouts. Sorry we're late, he announced to no one in particular. Traffic was a bitch, and Amber here needed to make herself beautiful. He kissed the girl's cheek as she giggled. 15 years, and he still knew exactly how to command a room. That had been part of his appeal once, his charisma, his unpredictability. Now it just exhausted me. David, I nodded coolly as he approached, air-kissing my cheek. Olivia, he smiled, eyes traveling over me in that familiar way that still made my skin crawl. 40 suits you. Almost as good as 30 did. His eyes held mine a beat too long, a private reference to our past that made my blood pressure spike. Before I could respond, I spotted William Preston making his way through the crowd, leaning slightly on his cane. Despite his age, he remained imposing, tall like his sons, with a full head of white hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. Olivia, he greeted me with his customary stiffness, kissing my cheek without warmth. William, I'm so glad you could come. I matched his formality. He nodded. Robert tells me you've arranged quite an evening. We've missed you at family gatherings, I said diplomatically. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement? Disdain? Yes, well. Some occasions merit breaking routine. Before I could decipher his meaning, Claire appeared, gently reminding everyone dinner would be served in 20 minutes. As guests began drifting toward the dining room, Robert clinked his glass for attention. Before we move inside, I'd like to propose a toast. My husband's voice carried across the terrace. Guests turned, glasses raised. To my beautiful wife Olivia on her 40th birthday. 15 years ago, you made me the happiest man alive by saying yes. Every day since has been a gift. Warm smiles and murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. You've been not just my wife, but my partner in every sense, Robert continued. You brought grace, intelligence, and vision to both our family and our business. Preston Development wouldn't be what it is today without your marketing brilliance. I felt my cheeks flush with genuine pleasure. Robert had always acknowledged my contributions publicly, one of the many reasons I loved him. To Olivia, he concluded, raising his glass higher. The best decision I ever made. To Olivia. The crowd echoed, drinking. As I leaned in to kiss my husband, I caught David's expression over Robert's shoulder. His smile remained fixed, but his eyes had hardened to blue stones. Beside him, William watched us with an unreadable expression. Later, I would recognize this moment as the last peaceful one of the evening. The last moment before everything shattered. But right then, surrounded by friends and the family I'd married into, I felt only contentment and a vague sense of triumph. After 15 years, I had proven myself. I belonged here, in this world of wealth and privilege. I had earned my place. how quickly it would all unravel. The dining room glowed with candlelight, crystal, and silver. 5 round tables draped in cream linens filled the space, each centerpiece a cascade of white roses and blue hydrangeas. Place cards and elegant calligraphy guided guests to their seats, a seating arrangement I'd labored over for days, separating known enemies and potential business connections. I'd placed William at our table, along with Claire, Michael, and Sophia. David and his date sat at the adjacent table with friends from the yacht club, far enough from me to maintain my sanity. The first 3 courses passed pleasantly. Waiters glided silently around us, replacing plates and refilling wine glasses. Conversation flowed as easily as the vintage Bordeaux Robert had selected from our cellar. I found myself relaxing, enjoying the warm buzz of good food, fine wine, and engaging company. Between the main course and dessert, William tapped his water glass with a knife. The resonant chime silenced conversations throughout the room. "If I might have everyone's attention," he said, his voice stronger than his physical appearance suggested. "I know this is Olivia's celebration, and I don't wish to detract from that." He nodded in my direction without warmth. "But having all my family together provides a rare opportunity to share some news." Robert shot me a questioning glance. I shrugged slightly, equally puzzled. William continued, "As you know, I founded Preston Development 47 years ago with nothing but a loan from my father and a determination to succeed. I've watched it grow from a single apartment building in Dorchester to one of Boston's preeminent real estate companies." Murmurs of agreement and admiration rippled through the room. The Preston success story was well known in Boston business circles. For the past 5 years, Robert has led the company admirably as CEO, while I've enjoyed a semi-retirement. William nodded at his eldest son. "But at 75, I find myself contemplating legacy and the proper stewardship of what I built." Silence fell over the room. Even the waitstaff paused, sensing the gravity of the moment. "After considerable thought, I've made some decisions regarding my estate and the future leadership of Preston Development." William's gaze swept the room, lingering briefly on each of his children. "I've recently updated my will, which I'll discuss privately with each of you tomorrow. But I want to announce publicly that upon my death, controlling interest in Preston Development will pass not to a single heir, but will be divided." Robert stiffened beside me. This was unexpected. As eldest son and current CEO, he had always been understood to be William's primary heir. Robert will retain the CEO position but will share ownership equally with David and Michael. Claire's absence from this list hung in the air, though she showed no surprise. Gender equality had never been William Preston's strong suit. Additionally, William continued, "I've set aside $15 million, separate from company shares, to be given immediately upon my death to the child who has demonstrated the greatest loyalty to this family and its values." A beat of stunned silence followed. $15 million. Not tied to the company. Available immediately upon William's death. The implications buzzed through the room like angry wasps. "Is this a competition, Dad?" Michael asked with a nervous laugh. "Should we be keeping score?" William didn't smile. "It's a recognition of character, Michael. Something I've been observing for years." "Well, this dinner just got interesting," David drawled from his table, raising his wine glass in a mock toast. "Nothing like a little sibling rivalry to aid digestion." Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the room. I watched Robert's face carefully, seeing the subtle tightening around his eyes that signaled his displeasure. Claire stared at her water glass, knuckles white around the stem. Only Michael seemed unfazed, whispering something to Sophia that made her smile reluctantly. "Now," William said with finality, "I believe it's time for cake." On cue, the double doors to the dining room opened. Waiters entered carrying my birthday cake, a 3-tiered confection adorned with fresh flowers and 40 slender candles, all lit and glowing. The gathering broke into an off-key rendition of Happy Birthday, the awkwardness of William's announcement temporarily overshadowed by social obligation. I smiled and pretended not to notice the tension crackling between the Preston siblings. As the cake was placed before me, Robert squeezed my hand under the table. I looked up to find his eyes on me, full of apology for his father's hijacking of my celebration. "Make a wish," he murmured. I closed my eyes, leaning toward the dancing flames. What does a woman wish for on her 40th birthday? More youth? Greater beauty? Continued success? I wished for peace. For the strength to keep my secrets buried. For Robert never to discover the truth about his brother and me. With a deep breath, I extinguished all 40 candles in one try. Applause erupted around the room. As servers began cutting and distributing cake, I excused myself to the powder room, needing a moment alone to process William's bombshell announcement. The $15 million loyalty prize would devastate this family. William had essentially created a death watch competition among his children, a twisted game that would bring out the worst in all of them. In the hallway outside the dining room, a hand caught my arm, pulling me into the shadows beneath the staircase. I found myself face to face with David, close enough to smell the whiskey on his breath. "Quite a party, Olivia," he said, still gripping my arm. "Did you know about Dad's little announcement?" I pulled away. "Of course not." "Why would I?" "Because you've always known how to get what you want." His eyes raked over me. 15 years as Robert's wife, and you've never put a foot wrong. The perfect daughter-in-law. The perfect executive wife. Everyone sings Olivia's praises. His voice turned mocking. "You're drunk, David," I said flatly. "Go back to your date before she finds someone else's wallet to explore." His hand shot out, pinning me against the wall. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you?" Little Olivia from South Boston clawed her way into a family fortune. I kept my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "Take your hands off me. Now." "Or what? You'll tell Robert?" He leaned closer, his breath hot on my face. "Will you also tell him what happened that weekend in Newport? When he was in Chicago closing the Riverside deal, and you and I—" "Nothing happened in Newport," I hissed. "I've told you 1,000 times." David laughed, a harsh sound in the dimly lit hallway. "Keep telling yourself that, Olivia. But we both know what kind of woman you really are. Gold-digging trash who? Is there a problem here?" Claire's voice cut through the tension. She stood at the edge of the hallway, arms crossed, eyes darting between us. David released me immediately, smoothing his expression into casual charm. "Just catching up with my favorite sister-in-law. Birthday girl secrets." He winked at Claire before sauntering back toward the dining room. Claire watched him go, then turned to me. "Are you okay? You look pale." I straightened my dress with shaking hands. "I'm fine. David's just being David." She studied me with concern. "He's getting worse. The drinking, the recklessness. Last month he nearly crashed Dad's boat racing some teenagers in the harbor." "Your father's announcement won't help," I said. 15 million for loyalty? It's like he's deliberately trying to tear you all apart." Claire sighed. "That's Dad. He's always pitted the boys against each other. Says competition builds character." "It builds resentment," I countered. "True." She glanced toward the dining room. "We should get back before they notice." I nodded, taking a deep breath to compose myself. "You go ahead. I still need that powder room break." As Claire walked away, I leaned against the wall, trying to calm my racing heart. David's veiled threat hung in the air like poison. The Newport lie, the story he'd been telling himself for 13 years. The weekend that had never happened the way he claimed. But who would believe my word against his? The outsider versus the Preston Sun? In the powder room, I splashed cold water on my wrists, a trick my mother had taught me for calming nerves. My reflection showed nothing of my inner turmoil. Years of practice had perfected my mask. I reapplied my lipstick, fluffed my hair, and straightened my shoulders. Olivia Preston, successful marketing executive and beloved wife, would return to her birthday party. The frightened woman in the hallway would stay hidden, as she always did. Back in the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. William's announcement had divided the room into whispered conversations and speculative glances. I slipped into my seat beside Robert, who was deep in conversation with a business associate. "Everything okay?" he asked, briefly turning to me. "Perfect," I lied smoothly. Across the room, David was regaling his table with some animated story, his date giggling on cue. Our eyes met briefly, a challenge passing between us. After cake and coffee, guests began to drift toward the living room where the band had set up. Michael's twins had long since been taken upstairs by their nanny, and the party was transitioning to its adult phase, more drinking, dancing, and the inevitable business conversations that occurred whenever wealthy Bostonians gathered. Robert pulled me onto the dance floor, holding me close as the band played a slow jazz standard. "I'm sorry about my father," he murmured into my hair. "He had no right to hijack your birthday." I rested my head on his shoulder. "It's not your fault. The 15 million is clearly designed to manipulate us." Classic William Preston power play. I looked up at my husband's troubled face. "What will you do?" Robert sighed. "Nothing. Let Michael and David scramble for Dad's approval if they want. I've never needed his money." His noble response made me love him even more. Robert had always been the best of the Prestons, hardworking, honest, kind. Everything his father and brothers were not. As the song ended, William appeared at Robert's elbow. "A word in private, son?" His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Robert squeezed my hand. "I'll be right back." I watched them disappear into Robert's study, unease crawling up my spine again. Whatever William had to say, I doubted it would improve the evening. Left alone, I circulated among my guests, accepting birthday wishes and making small talk. The alcohol flowed freely now, voices growing louder, laughter more frequent. No one seemed to notice my distraction as I kept one eye on the study door. 20 minutes passed before Robert emerged, his face carefully composed but white around the lips, a tell I recognized from our rare arguments. William followed, looking grimly satisfied. Robert rejoined me, taking my elbow perhaps more firmly than necessary. "Dance with me," he said, his voice oddly flat. Back on the dance floor, I searched his face. What happened? What did he say? My husband's jaw worked silently for a moment. "Not now, Olivia." "Robert." I said not now. His tone left no room for argument. We finished the dance in silence, his body rigid against mine. When the song ended, he walked off the dance floor without a word, heading straight for the bar. I stood abandoned in the middle of the floor, confusion and dread building in my chest. Robert never drank heavily, and he never dismissed me. Something was very wrong. Before I could follow him, Claire appeared at my side. "Olivia, there's a problem with the gift table. Some packages got knocked over when the Henderson's son was running around." I allowed myself to be pulled away, casting one last look at Robert downing what appeared to be straight whiskey at the bar. William stood in the corner speaking with Michael, whose usual cheerful expression had vanished, replaced by something that looked disturbingly like anger as he glanced in my direction. The gift situation took only minutes to resolve, but when I returned to the main room, I couldn't locate Robert. David had taken over the piano from the band's pianist, showing off the classical training he rarely acknowledged. His date hung adoringly on the edge of the instrument, while other guests gathered around, impressed by his skill. Always the performer, I thought bitterly. I spotted Michael and Sophia in heated conversation by the terrace doors. Sophia noticed me looking and quickly pulled Michael outside, away from prying eyes. What the hell had William said to his sons? The band announced they would take a short break before the final set of the evening. Guests drifted toward the bar or the terrace, enjoying the mild night air. I checked my watch, nearly 11. The party would wind down soon, and then I could finally get Robert alone and discover what had upset him. As if conjured by my thoughts, my husband reappeared from the direction of his study, face flushed and eyes too bright. He'd clearly continued drinking away from the crowd. In 15 years of marriage, I'd never seen him truly drunk. The sight disturbed me more than I could express. Robert, I approached him cautiously. Are you okay? He looked at me strangely, as if seeing a stranger. Am I okay? He repeated, his words slightly slurred. That's an interesting question, Olivia. I lowered my voice. You're drunk. Maybe we should wrap things up, send everyone home. And miss the grand finale of your birthday? He laughed without humor. No, I think we need to see this evening through. Don't you? Before I could respond, the sound of silverware clinking against crystal rang out. All eyes turned to the center of the room where David now stood, glass raised high. Ladies and gentlemen, he called, his voice carrying that theatrical quality he reserved for public speaking. I'd like to propose a special toast to the birthday girl. My stomach dropped. David was even drunker than Robert, his movements too fluid, his smile too wide. For those who don't know me, I'm David Preston, Robert's more handsome brother. Polite laughter rippled through the room. And I've had the unique pleasure of knowing Olivia for, how long has it been, Olivia? 15 years? No, longer, isn't it? I felt the blood drain from my face. Robert stiffened beside me. It's been 15 years since she married my brother, David continued, his eyes locked on mine, but our acquaintance goes back further. Back to before she became Mrs. Preston. Claire stepped forward. David, maybe this isn't the time. Oh, but it is, little sister. David's voice took on a harder edge. It's exactly the time. Because my father has just offered $15 million for loyalty to this family. And I think we should discuss what loyalty means. The room had gone completely silent. 50 pairs of eyes darted between David and me. David, I said quietly, warning in my voice. You're drunk. This isn't appropriate. He ignored me, addressing the room again. Did you know Olivia worked as a cocktail waitress when Robert met her? South Boston girl, putting herself through community college. A real rags to riches story. His tone made the words an insult. Very ambitious. Very determined to better herself. Robert's hand found mine, squeezing hard enough to hurt. I couldn't read his expression. David, that's enough, William's commanding voice cut through the room. You're making a fool of yourself. David's laughed, a brittle sound. Am I, Dad? Or am I finally saying what this family has politely ignored for 15 years? He turned back to the uncomfortable crowd. Let me tell you about loyalty. Let me tell you about the summer before Robert and Olivia got engaged. My heart stopped. He wouldn't. He couldn't. David, Robert's voice was low, dangerous. Stop now. But David was beyond stopping, fueled by alcohol and 15 years of resentment. Did you tell him, Olivia? Did you tell my brother about the weekend in Newport when he was closing the Chicago deal? When you came to my apartment, desperate and crying because he hadn't proposed yet? The room spun around me. This was my nightmare come to life, David's twisted version of events, the lie he'd convinced himself was truth after all these years. That's not what happened, I whispered, but my voice was lost in the collective intake of breath from our audience. Did you tell him how you seduced me? His own brother? How you said you'd always wanted me first, but settled for the brother with the CEO title? Robert dropped my hand as if burned. Robert, he's lying, I said urgently. It never happened. Not like that. David's eyes glittered with malice. She's the liar, brother. Ask yourself, why would I make this up? What would I gain by inventing this? The crowd had gone deathly quiet, witnessing the implosion of my carefully constructed life with horrified fascination. You came to my apartment, David continued relentlessly. You brought a bottle of wine. You said Robert was taking too long to commit, and you were tired of waiting. You said you'd always found me more attractive anyway. Each word was a knife. No, I shook my head violently. That never happened. Robert still hadn't spoken, his face a mask of shock and growing anger. You spent the night, Olivia, David pressed on. And then when Robert proposed the following month, you pretended nothing had happened. You made me promise never to tell him, said it would kill him to know. Stop it. I finally found my voice, loud and breaking with emotion. That is not what happened. I came to your apartment to talk about Robert's birthday surprise. You were drunk, you tried to force yourself on me, and I left. Gasps echoed through the room. David's face darkened with fury. You lying bitch, he snarled. You've spent 15 years poisoning my brother against me, making him think I'm the family screw-up while you play the perfect wife. And now my father is going to reward your manipulation with $15 million? It happened so fast. 3 long strides and David was in front of me. I saw his hand rise, felt the shocking sting as his palm connected with my cheek. The force snapped my head sideways, sending me stumbling. Claire screamed. Someone, Michael maybe, shouted David's name. Robert lunged forward too late. The room exploded into chaos. Women gasped. Men surged forward. But through the ringing in my ears, through the pain blooming across my face, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. This ends now. Standing straight, I touched my burning cheek and looked David Preston directly in the eyes. And I smiled. The immediate aftermath of the slap unfolded like scenes from a movie playing at half speed. Robert grabbed David by the lapels, shoving him backward with a violence I'd never witnessed in my gentle husband. You're dead to me, Robert growled, his cultured voice transformed by rage. Get out of my house. Now. Security guards materialized, part of the event staff I'd hired, anticipating drunk guests but never this. They flanked David, not quite touching him but making their presence known. The Preston name still commanded respect, even in disgrace. You've always believed her over me, David spat at Robert, straightening his jacket with exaggerated dignity. Your perfect wife. If you only knew. Enough. William's voice cracked like a whip. The patriarch stood leaning on his cane, face mottled with anger. You've disgraced this family for the last time, David. Get out before I have you thrown out. David's gaze swept the room, taking in the shocked faces, the averted eyes, the phones discreetly recording every moment of his downfall. Something shifted in his expression, the first flicker of understanding of what he'd just done. Come on, David, his date tugged at his arm, her earlier adoration replaced by embarrassment. Let's just go. He allowed himself to be led toward the door, but paused to look back at me one last time. I hadn't moved, still standing with my hand pressed to my cheek, still wearing that smile that seemed to unnerve him more than any screaming could have. This isn't over, he said, but his voice had lost its conviction. Oh, but it is, I replied softly, for his ears alone. You just don't know it yet. Then he was gone, the heavy front door closing behind him with finality. The room erupted into a buzz of whispered conversations and uncomfortable movements. Guests who moments ago had been enjoying my birthday celebration now couldn't decide whether to flee or stay for the next act of the drama. Claire took command with surprising authority. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, I think we can all agree the evening has reached its natural conclusion. Thank you so much for coming to celebrate Olivia's birthday. The valets are ready with your cars. People began gathering purses and jackets, making awkward farewells. Some approached me with murmured support or uncomfortable hugs. Boston society would dine out on this scandal for months. Through it all, I maintained my composure, thanking guests for coming as if the evening had ended normally rather than imploded spectacularly. Only those who knew me well might have noticed my eyes, cold and focused, already calculating my next moves. Robert stood apart, accepting condolences from departing friends with mechanical politeness. He wouldn't look at me. The gulf between us, opened by David's accusations and widened by Robert's doubt, yawned like a physical presence. Within 30 minutes, the house had emptied of everyone except family. Michael and Sophia huddled in conversation by the fireplace. Claire directed staff in efficient cleanup. William sat heavily in an armchair, looking every one of his 75 years. The silence stretched, taut and dangerous. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice colorless. Dad, I think you should stay here tonight. It's late, and your driver has probably gone home. William nodded wearily. Probably wise. Claire can show you to the guest room. Robert turned to his brother. Michael, take Sophia and the boys home. We'll talk tomorrow. Michael hesitated, looking between Robert and me. Rob, are you sure? Go home, Michael. The words were clipped, final. After awkward goodbyes, they left. Staff finished cleaning and departed. The enormous house fell silent except for the distant sound of Claire settling William in the East Wing guest room. Robert and I faced each other across the ruins of my birthday party. My husband's face was a mask I couldn't read, something new and terrifying after 15 years of marriage. Robert, I began. Not here, he cut me off, turning toward his study. In private. I followed him, struggling to organize my thoughts. Everything depended on what happened next, how I explained, what he believed. 15 years of marriage balanced on a knife's edge. Robert's study was his sanctuary, dark wood, leather chairs, walls lined with books he'd actually read. He closed the door behind us, then moved to the bar cart and poured himself another whiskey. He didn't offer me one. Was he telling the truth? Robert asked without preamble, his back still to me. No, I answered immediately. Not the way he told it. Robert turned slowly. That's not a denial, Olivia. I took a deep breath. 13 years ago, while you were in Chicago closing the Riverside deal, I did go to David's apartment. Robert's face hardened, but I pressed on. I went to ask his advice about your birthday gift. I was planning to buy you that vintage watch you'd admired, and David knew the dealer. I held my husband's gaze steadily. He'd been drinking when I arrived. He made a pass at me. When I refused him, he got aggressive. I left immediately and never told you because I knew it would destroy your relationship with your brother. He says you spent the night. Robert's voice was dangerously quiet. He's lying, I said firmly. I was there less than 20 minutes. Check the security footage from our condo building that night, I was home by 9. That was 13 years ago. There is no footage. Then I don't know how to prove it to you, I said, frustration bleeding into my voice. It's my word against his, I said, feeling the cold reality settle in my stomach. After 15 years, I thought you knew me better than this. Robert rubbed his forehead, the lines around his eyes deepening. Olivia, you have to understand. My father just pulled me into his study to warn me that you've been manipulating me, that you've orchestrated David's failures at the company to make yourself indispensable. And you believed him? The hurt in my voice was genuine. I don't know what to believe right now. Robert's control finally broke. He slammed his glass down. In one night, my father has turned my siblings against each other with this loyalty inheritance, and my brother has accused my wife of betraying me before we were even married. I moved closer, careful not to touch him yet. Robert, think about who David is. Think about his pattern of behavior over the years. The women, the drinking, the failures at work that I've covered for repeatedly. Ask yourself who has stood by you for 15 years and who has let you down again and again. Something in my words seemed to reach him. His shoulders sagged slightly. I need time to process this, he said finally. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. As he moved toward the door, I spoke softly but firmly. Robert, if you walk out that door, you're telling David and your father that their words mean more to you than 15 years of marriage. He paused, hand on the doorknob. That's not fair, Olivia. None of this is fair, I replied. But if we don't present a united front, your family will destroy us. After a long moment, Robert turned back to me. What happened 13 years ago? The complete truth, Olivia. No more protecting anyone. I sat in one of the leather chairs, suddenly exhausted. I told you most of it. I went to David's apartment about your birthday gift, that part was true. He'd been drinking, but he seemed fine at first. We talked about the watch. He made a call to the dealer. I paused, the memory still uncomfortable after all these years. Then he offered me a drink. I accepted 1 glass of wine. While I was in the bathroom, he refilled it. I think he put something in it. Robert's face darkened. Are you saying he drugged you? I don't know for certain, I said carefully. But I started feeling strange. Dizzy. When I said I needed to leave, he blocked the door. He said we both knew I had chosen the wrong brother. He tried to kiss me. I pushed him away and managed to get out. And you never told me. Robert's voice was hollow. He called the next morning, apologizing profusely, claiming he'd been blackout drunk and didn't remember anything. He begged me not to tell you, said it would destroy your relationship. I believed that protecting your family bond was more important than my discomfort. Did he? Robert couldn't finish the question. No, I assured him quickly. Nothing happened beyond what I've told you. I got away. But David has spent 13 years convincing himself of a different narrative, one where I wanted him, where I betrayed you. It's easier for his ego than accepting he tried to assault his brother's girlfriend. Robert sank into the chair opposite me, the anger draining from him. God, Olivia. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I loved you. Because I knew how much your family meant to you. Because I was the outsider, and it would have been my word against his. I leaned forward. And honestly? I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. Just like tonight. The pain in his eyes told me my words had hit home. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have trusted you immediately. Yes, you should have. I didn't soften the blow. But David has had years to plant doubts, and your father never thought I was good enough for you. I understand how difficult this is. Robert reached for my hand. What do we do now? I squeezed his fingers, relief washing through me that we had weathered the immediate storm. Now? Now we deal with David. I'll call the company lawyers in the morning. He's finished at Preston Development. I shook my head. That's not enough. Not after tonight. Robert studied my face. What are you thinking? I smiled then, the same smile I'd given David after he slapped me. I'm thinking it's time David learned what happens when you underestimate the cocktail waitress from South Boston. Morning arrived with the particular clarity that follows catastrophe. I awoke before Robert, my mind already mapping out the day ahead with surgical precision. He'd fallen asleep holding me, his silent way of apologizing for the moment of doubt. I slipped from his arms without waking him and padded downstairs to my home office. The house was quiet, though I knew Claire was likely awake somewhere, probably making coffee and worrying about the family implosion. William would still be asleep in the guest room, and the staff wouldn't arrive for another hour. Perfect. I needed privacy for what came next. My office was my sanctuary, the one room in the house I had designed entirely myself. Modern, minimalist, with a view of the lake. I locked the door behind me and moved to the large painting on the wall opposite my desk. Behind it was a small safe, not the main house safe that Robert knew about, but my private one. The combination came easily to my fingers, July 21st, 10. The date I truly understood what kind of family I had married into. Inside were documents, flash drives, and a small notebook. The receipts, as my mother would have called them. Insurance policies against a day I had hoped would never come. I removed a particular flash drive and plugged it into my laptop. The contents were meticulously organized by year, then by Preston family member. David's folder was the largest. 13 years of documentation. Emails. Text messages. Photos. Financial records. Recordings. David hadn't been entirely wrong last night. I was ambitious. I was determined. But not in the way he claimed. Growing up in South Boston with a single mother who cleaned houses for the wealthy had taught me valuable lessons. Chief among them, protect yourself, because no one else will. When I married into the Preston family, my mother had pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner. "They'll never truly accept you," she'd warned, her face lined from years of hard work. "Keep your eyes open and your evidence ready." I'd thought she was being paranoid, bitter about her own life of struggle. But I'd heeded her advice anyway, starting a careful record of every interaction with my new family. Just in case. That caution had saved me after the incident with David. I hadn't told Robert the complete truth last night. I had proof of what had happened 13 years ago. I clicked on a video file. The image was grainy, clearly recorded on an old phone, but the audio was clear enough. A younger David, blocking the door to his apartment. My voice, slurred but frightened, asking him to move. His refusal, his advances, his angry words when rejected. I had kept this video all these years, never wanting to use it. Family peace had seemed more important. Robert's relationship with his brother had seemed worth protecting. That calculation had changed the moment David's palm connected with my face. A soft knock at my office door broke my concentration. "Olivia? Are you in there?" Claire's voice. "I've made coffee." I closed the laptop. "Coming." In the kitchen, Claire sat at the island counter, looking like she hadn't slept. 2 steaming mugs of coffee sat before her. "How are you?" she asked as I joined her. I accepted the coffee gratefully. "Better than I probably should be." "Robert?" "We talked it out. He believes me." I didn't elaborate. Claire nodded, relief evident. "Good." I was worried. "Well, you know how persuasive David can be when he wants to be." "Not this time," I said firmly. "This time he's gone too far." She studied me carefully. "What are you going to do?" I took a sip of coffee, weighing how much to share. Claire had always been my ally among the Prestons, but her loyalty to her family ran deep. "What would you do," I asked instead, "if you were publicly humiliated, accused of something you didn't do, and then physically assaulted?" Claire winced. "I'd probably want revenge." "Not revenge," I corrected. "Justice." "Is there a difference?" she challenged. "Revenge is emotional. Justice is strategic." I held her gaze. "I've spent 15 years being the perfect Preston wife, Claire. I've covered for David's mistakes at work, made excuses for his behavior at family functions, and kept silent about things that would have destroyed his relationship with Robert. All to keep peace in this family. And now? Now peace is no longer my priority." Claire was silent for a long moment. "Dad's awake. He wants a family meeting this morning." "Of course he does," I said flatly. "Another opportunity to pit you all against each other." "Olivia. Your father's announcement last night was deliberately designed to create conflict," I interrupted. "The 15 million loyalty prize? It's manipulative and cruel." Claire's expression grew troubled. "He's always been that way. Believing that competition between us brings out our best." "It brings out the worst," I countered. "Look what happened last night." She couldn't argue with that. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the previous evening hanging between us. "What time is this meeting?" I asked finally. 10 o'clock. Michael will be here with Sophia." "And David?" Claire's mouth tightened. "Dad called him this morning. Ordered him to be here." I nodded slowly, a plan crystallizing. "Then I'd better get ready." "Olivia," Claire caught my arm as I stood to leave. "Whatever you're planning, remember that he's still family." I looked down at her, this woman who had welcomed me when others hadn't, who had always tried to be the peacemaker in a family of fighters. "Family doesn't do what David did last night," I said softly. "And family doesn't stand by and let it happen." I left her with that thought and went upstairs to prepare for battle. Robert was awake, sitting on the edge of our bed staring at nothing. He looked up when I entered, his face haggard. "Your father's called a family meeting for 10, I said, moving to my closet. "Of course he has," Robert sighed. "Olivia, about last night." We've moved past that, I cut him off, selecting a crisp white blouse and black pencil skirt, armor for the confrontation ahead. Now we need to present a united front. Against David? Against anyone who threatens us. I turned to face him. Your father didn't just announce that inheritance to reward loyalty, Robert. He did it to test it. To see which of his children would turn on each other for money. Robert ran a hand through his hair. That sounds like him. And it worked perfectly. Within hours, David was publicly accusing me of betrayal, Michael was glaring at me across the room, and you were doubting our entire marriage. The truth of my words hit home. Robert's expression darkened with understanding. So what's our play here? He asked, standing and moving to his own closet. I smiled slightly, appreciating his shift to our rather than your. This was the partner I had married, strategic, focused. First, we find out exactly what your father said to you and Michael last night, I replied. Then we determine if he knowingly encouraged David's accusations. And if he did? Then we make it very clear that manipulating this family ends today. By 9:55, we were downstairs in the formal living room. William sat in an armchair by the fireplace, looking rested and calm despite the previous night's drama. Claire perched nervously on the sofa, while Michael paced by the windows. Sophia had stayed home with the twins, a wise decision given the tension crackling in the air. Robert and I entered hand in hand, a deliberate statement. William's eyes narrowed slightly at our united front. Good morning, I said pleasantly, as if this were any normal family gathering. Can I offer anyone coffee before we begin? Let's not stand on ceremony, William replied. We're just waiting for. The front door opened and closed with a bang. David strode in, looking surprisingly put together despite the previous night's excesses. No date until this time. Well, isn't this cozy, he drawled, glancing around the room. His eyes landed on me, hard and challenging. I met his gaze evenly, my face betraying nothing of the righteous fury burning beneath my calm exterior. The mark of his hand had faded from my cheek, but we both knew the blow had landed deeper than skin. Now that we're all here, William said, let's address what happened last night. You mean when David assaulted Olivia in front of 50 guests? Robert's voice was cold. I was provoked, David shot back. Enough, William rapped his cane on the floor. This behavior is unacceptable from Preston men. Whatever disagreements exist between you, they should be handled privately. I laughed then, a genuine sound of disbelief that drew everyone's attention. That's your concern? The public nature of the assault rather than the assault itself? William fixed me with his steely gaze. Olivia, while I don't condone David's actions, you must understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I cut him off, rising from my seat. I understand that you called your sons into private conversations last night and filled their heads with doubts about me. I understand that you created this conflict with your announcement about the $15 million loyalty prize. And I understand that you've never accepted me as part of this family. The room fell silent. Even David looked surprised by my directness. What I don't understand, I continued, is why you would deliberately try to destroy your son's marriage. William's face flushed. How dare you suggest? What did you say to Robert last night in his study? I demanded. And to Michael? What exactly did you tell them about me? Michael shifted uncomfortably. Dad said we needed to be careful, that you had too much influence over company decisions. That you might be manipulating Robert for your own gain. And you? I looked at Robert. My husband's jaw tightened. He suggested that you've been undermining David at the company intentionally. That you've hidden information from me to make David's projects fail while making yours succeed. I turned back to William. And what evidence did you provide for these accusations? I don't need to explain myself to you, William said stiffly. No, you don't, I agreed. But you might want to explain to your attorney why you've been embezzling from your own company for the past 5 years. The bomb I'd just dropped left the room in stunned silence. William's face went from red to white in an instant. That's absurd, he sputtered. I walked to my purse, removed a thin folder, and placed it on the coffee table. Bank statements. Offshore accounts. Money transfers disguised as consultant fees to shell companies you control. About $10 million so far. David found his voice first. This is ridiculous. She's making this up to deflect from what she did. Am I? I turned to him, my voice dangerously soft. Should we also discuss the real reason the Miller deal fell through last year? The one you blamed on marketing's poor timing? David's face paled slightly. You don't know what you're talking about. The escort service you charged to the company credit card? The one you took to the client meeting where you were supposed to be finalizing contract details? I raised an eyebrow. That was quite a billing statement. Michael sat down heavily. Jesus, David. I turned my attention back to William. For 15 years, I've protected this family. I've covered for David's mistakes, smoothed over Michael's inexperience, and helped Robert build Preston Development into something twice as profitable as when he took over. And in return, you've questioned my motives, doubted my loyalty, and tried to turn my husband against me. Robert moved to stand beside me, his shoulder touching mine in silent support. Whatever you think of me, I continued, whatever South Boston prejudices you still cling to, the fact remains that I have been the most loyal person in this room. Not for the promise of $15 million, but because I love my husband and respected his family. William's face had settled into a cold mask. What do you want, Olivia? The question hung in the air, the patriarch finally recognizing the shift in power dynamics. 3 things, I replied calmly. First, David will take a 6-month leave of absence from the company, during which time he will complete a rehabilitation program for his alcohol issues. David started to protest, but William silenced him with a raised hand, eyes never leaving mine. Continue. Second, the $15 million loyalty prize will be removed from your will and instead donated to South Boston Community College's scholarship fund for single parents, in my mother's name. William's mouth tightened, but he nodded curtly. And third? You will never again attempt to interfere in my marriage or undermine me at the company. If you do, the documentation in that folder and much more will find its way to the board of directors and possibly the authorities. The room remained silent as William weighed his options. I knew what he saw: exposure, possibly criminal charges, certainly public humiliation far worse than what we'd experienced last night. And if I agree to these terms? He asked finally. Then we remain a family, I said simply. Dysfunctional as we are, we stay united to the outside world. Preston Development continues to thrive under Robert's leadership, with Michael and Claire taking on greater responsibilities. You enjoy your retirement without scandal. And David gets the help he needs. William studied me with new eyes, not with respect, exactly, but with a dawning understanding of who he was dealing with. Finally, he nodded. Very well. I turned to David, who had remained uncharacteristically silent. As for you and me, we have unfinished business. Olivia, Robert began, concerned. It's all right, I assured him before focusing on David again. In the study. Now. Curiosity overcame his anger, and David followed me out of the room. Once in Robert's study with the door closed, I faced my brother-in-law directly. Last night, you told a room full of people that I seduced you 13 years ago, I said without preamble. That was a lie. Your word against mine, he replied, but without his usual confidence. I moved to the desk, opened my laptop, and turned it toward him. Not exactly. David's face drained of color as he watched the video of his younger self blocking my exit, making unwanted advances, growing angry at rejection. Where did you get that? He whispered. I've learned to protect myself, I said simply. I have similar documentation of most of our interactions over the years. The inappropriate comments. The accidental touches. The sabotage of my projects at work. His shock gave way to calculation. What do you want? Money? I closed the laptop with a decisive click. I want acknowledgement. You will write personal apologies to me and to Robert, taking full responsibility for both your actions 13 years ago and your behavior last night. You will then follow through with the rehabilitation program. And you will never, ever, touch me again. David stared at me, a mixture of hatred and newfound wariness in his eyes. And if I refuse? Then the video goes to Robert. To the board. To every woman you've ever dated. I stepped closer. I've spent 15 years being underestimated by you, David. That ends today. Something in my voice must have convinced him of my resolve. After a long moment, he nodded stiffly. Write the apologies now, I instructed, pointing to the desk. I'll wait. As he sat down, defeated, to comply with my demand, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a weary relief that maybe, just maybe, this family could begin to heal. 1 year later, I stood on the same terrace where my 40th birthday party had imploded, watching guests arrive for my 41st. The guest list was smaller this time, just family and our closest friends. No grand gestures, no elaborate decorations. Just good food, good wine, and people I actually wanted to spend time with. Robert slipped an arm around my waist. Happy birthday, love. I leaned into him, savoring his solid presence. Thank you for doing this. I know last year left a bad taste. He kissed my temple. This year will be different. And it was. In the 12 months since that catastrophic night, the Preston family had undergone remarkable transformations. William had kept his word, donating the $15 million to the scholarship fund. He'd even attended the dedication ceremony, standing stiffly beside me as South Boston Community College named the program after my mother. The press had loved it, the wealthy patriarch honoring his daughter-in-law's humble beginnings. Only our family knew the truth behind the gesture. David had completed 6 months in an exclusive rehabilitation center in Arizona. Upon his return, he'd been quiet, subdued, a shadow of his former charismatic self. But gradually, he'd begun rebuilding his life on healthier foundations. He worked with a therapist twice weekly. He attended AA meetings. He even started dating a divorced pediatrician with 2 children, a woman his own age who had no interest in his family name or fortune. Tonight would be his first family gathering since the incident. I'd invited him personally, a peace offering of sorts. Are you sure about this? Robert had asked when I made the decision. Family doesn't give up on family, I'd replied, surprising myself with the sentiment. Even when they don't deserve it. Michael and Sophia arrived first, their twins racing toward me with birthday cards they'd made themselves. Claire followed shortly after, bringing her new boyfriend, a literature professor she'd met at a charity event. The change in her was remarkable, away from her father's domineering presence, she'd blossomed. William arrived next, moving more slowly with his cane but still commanding respect. He kissed my cheek, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Olivia, he acknowledged. You look well. Thank you, William. So do you. We had reached a détente of sorts. Not friendship, not even genuine affection, but a mutual respect born of the recognition that we were both formidable in our own ways. David was the last to arrive. He stood at the terrace entrance, a small gift box in his hands, uncertainty in his posture. Our eyes met across the space, and I nodded slightly, permission to approach. Happy birthday, he said quietly, offering the box. I accepted it, conscious of Robert tensing beside me. Thank you for coming. Inside the box was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a shield. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. It's beautiful, I said honestly. I wanted to thank you, David said, his voice lower so others couldn't hear. For the invitation. And for not releasing the video. I'm working on being someone who deserves a second chance. I studied him, looking for the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to detecting in his words. Finding none, I nodded. One day at a time, right? A small, genuine smile touched his lips. That's what they tell me. As we moved to join the others, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The Preston family wasn't healed, not completely. There were still fault lines, still moments of tension. William would likely never fully accept me. David's recovery remained a work in progress. The competition between the siblings occasionally flared. But something fundamental had shifted. Perhaps it was simply that the pretense had been stripped away. We had seen each other at our worst and somehow remained standing. There was honesty now where before there had been only appearances. Later that evening, as we gathered around a much smaller birthday cake, Robert raised his glass. To Olivia, he said simply, "Who taught this family what loyalty really means?" As glasses clinked and the small flames from 41 candles illuminated the faces of my complicated, difficult, gradually healing family, I made my wish and blew. Not for peace this time. Peace was too fragile, too easily shattered. I wished for resilience. For the strength to keep building something real from the broken pieces of the past. And looking around at the people who had survived the worst with me, I believed it might just come true.